Hey, this is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. This is a BBM cast iron block for one of the next builds on my docket, which is another 511 cubic inch FE motor using J. Brown's new FE Power cylinder heads. We're going to be trying to make some horsepower with this one, and I think that we will. My personal goal is 900, so we'll see how close we get. Particular heads for this build have been CNC ported. They flow, I think, if I remember correctly, about 460 CFM at that 800-900 lift level. And we've got a custom solid roller camshaft coming that will take advantage of that lift. Steel crank in the bottom with some Molnar rods and some diamond pistons. And it's going to be a dual carburetor intake manifold setup, so be a nice engine. And this is the first step to working on the build. The heads will not be completely finished for another probably couple months, but we're going to go ahead and knock out what we can on the build. As I mentioned, this is a BBM cast iron block. Been fully machined, currently at a 4375 bore size. The mains have been line honed, the decks have been squared up, lifter bores touch honed. So we're going to be prepping, painting, getting this block ready to go. Can't really do much right now. I can check some main bearing clearances, and that's probably about it. But we're going to get started. I'm going to roll this block over. So you see I've already got the cam bearings in there, as well as that rear cam plug. We'll go over some of the cam bearing high points real quick. So these blocks don't use, this is typical for your aftermarket block, they don't use a standard FE bearing. They use an FP01 bearing from Durabond. They are very wide, so that makes you watch for certain things. If you notice the lifter bore right there, you have to be very careful of how far you knock this bearing in, or it will block off the lifter bore. So that happens on the number 4 and the number 2. So you gotta be very careful. On the front bearing, I use a traditional FE bearing. If you use the wide bearing, it just messes up a lot of stuff. You end up having to grind most of the bearing away to clear the distributor gear and everything. So I just use a standard FP or a F33 front bearing there. As you can see, the bottoms of the cylinders are chamfered. That should be done on any block that you're using, no matter what it is, no matter what the stroke is. That is just a good practice. If something happens and this is not deburred and the piston skirt gets down there, it can sometimes roll the aluminum up on the skirt, and that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the engine's life. On this particular build, I've already blended in the oil pump flange, gasket matched that. The blocks come with this black coating on it. I haven't had any issues with the black coating flaking off, but the old gray coating, I saw that stuff flake off a lot. So what I do, if somebody happens to have a block with the gray coating, I'll just go ahead and blast that block and knock all that stuff off there. The black seems to stay on very well. I am not a coating on the inside of an engine block fan at the least bit, but this seems to stay on there okay. What I am going to do though is after we clean the block, we're going to paint it, and pull out the freeze plugs and put a nice coat of VHT satin black over top of it. So the first order of business here is to, the block's been jet washed a couple of times, but that generally doesn't always remove everything inside, and the stuff inside the galleries is what you really have to watch closely. So let me show you how I handle all of that. So what we can do is we can take these bore brushes, these engine cleaning brushes that you can pick up in a kit. I always cut the ends of mine off so I can chuck them up in a little drill motor, and they usually end up with a little kink in them or a little bend, but that's okay, because what that does is that kind of puts a spin on the brush. And you just go through and hit all these main oil galleries. There's going to be one, let's see, I'm upside down. So there's going to be one behind this. There's going to be one here. There's going to be one here, and there's about 17,000 up on the top of the engine. And that just reminded me to make sure that this hole is tapped deep enough for the distributor plug. We don't want the distributor hitting on that. But basically you just start your brush, start your drill, and just run that in and out, and then I'll show you what I do after that. Okay, so here's just something on camera to show. This plug, you always try these out on aftermarket blocks, and when you're using a stock block, factory block, and you tap that, make sure that you run a plug in it and make sure it's underneath that surface of the distributor. So this one as well, underneath. When you tighten it up, you don't want the distributor hanging on that guy. So we're in good shape here. Let me throw my tools on the floor. So we're going to go through and brush all the lifter galleries and main galleries, which includes all these main galleries that shoot off to each main bearing. So we'll get those nice and clean, and then what I usually do is pump some lacquer thinner with a battery operated pump. I'll just shove it in a hole and pump it through, and that helps ensure that all these 90-degree turns, like on a factory block, you got this 90-degree turn that comes up through here. You know, you can't get a brush down in that radius, so that helps to ensure that you flush anything out that would be in the way there. So here's the pump I use, just a little battery operated deal. Stick this end down in a bucket of lacquer thinner or whatever solvent, and just hold this up against the gallery entry and flush it out. So you can take a good pin light and make sure you can look down each end, make sure you got all the big stuff out. Just flush it really good and blow it out, and then it'll be ready for paint. Okay, so we got everything washed out, everything looks clean. Inside you can take a good pin light, as I mentioned, and just look through all the galleries. Pet peeve of mine, it is not a galley, it's a gallery. So that seems to get tossed around the internet incorrectly a lot, kind of like saying Edelbrock. It's Edelbrock. Milodon, it's Milodon. You can usually call the people on the phone and listen to them when they answer the phone how they pronounce their company name. So that's my soapbox for the day. Got our timing cover on there because I paint these as well. The screw and freeze plugs need to come out. They are a different size than a factory screw and freeze plug, but you can use one of these coupling nuts and just take a wrench and back those out. And they need to have some hooey gooey on them when you screw them back in. But once those come out, then we can mask the block off and get it ready for paint. Okay, so we got her all masked up and over the oil pan, oil filter adapter, and generally on blocks I use a coat of primer, but since this block is already black, sorta, then I'm just going to lay over a layer of satin black. I'm going to use VHT engine paint for this one. We're going to get a coat on here and probably take it a little bit longer to dry because it's cooler outside, and I don't spray inside, so it'll take a little bit longer to cure. I'll roll it outside, paint it, roll it back inside, stick it in front of the heater, and let it set up. Alright, we got a coat of black on here. I love this VHT satin black. It never disappoints. This block looks really, really good. I'm going to get the paper off of it, start unwrapping it, and then we can start to detail it further by putting the gallery plugs and everything in the block. So here's how good it looks. I think it looks great. It's a really nice sheen of black, satin black. Here's the mains on the BBM block, dowels, and then of course the side bolts. J's heads will only oil through the push rods. So on the fourth cam bearing and the second cam bearing, I have these clocked weird so that there's no oil that will go to the rockers. So it would be the passage on this side that would go up to the passenger side head, and this passage here that will go up to the driver's side head. So they usually intersect the deck surface of the block and come down to the cam bearing. Then you have pressurized oil that feeds each side of the head. There's a hole in the block, and normally if you want to oil through the heads, you clock your cam bearings so that the holes line up. I have these backwards so that they cannot oil. Here's our freeze plugs that we need to put back in. I'm going to put a little bit of Permatex thread sealant on those and get those screwed in. And our freeze plugs are in. Only advice I have on the BBM blocks with the freeze plugs is that they kind of struggle with how deep to tap the holes, and sometimes you got to readjust them on the dyno, or they leak a little bit. So we'll get our other plugs in, starting with the ones on the top. Make sure on the plugs that go inside the block to always coat those really well with oil so that they don't gall up when you're screwing them in. Plugs on the outside of the block get thread sealant. Alright, so you should have 1, 2, 3, the one behind the distributor. You see I've got it in there. This one right here, your thrust plate bolt fills that one. You've got block drain right there, block drain right here, your main passages that go to the mains. You've got 4 right here. You've got 2 3/8 plugs there. Then you've got an 1/8 inch pipe plug on the bottom. and you've got this guy right here. So this guy right here, remember what I told you about them tapping the holes so deep? This plug will go so far in that when you shine a light up in this hole that goes up to this passage right here, this plug can occlude that hole. So you have to be really careful on which pipe fitting you pick for that hole. Sometimes you even have to cut it off so that it doesn't stick into and block the hole. Okay, so we got our block all prepped, and I'm gonna go ahead and start checking our main bearing clearances. We won't have heads for a couple of months at least, and cam will be probably a couple months. So what I'm gonna do is just check main bearing clearances, make sure everything's okay with there. I'm not gonna drop the crank in right now. The cam that I've got coming has roughly a 1/2 inch of lobe lift, so I just want to do some mock-up before the crank and everything goes in. I want to be able to see everything easily, make sure we don't have any rod to cam interference or anything like that. So we're going to get our studs in here. We're going to check our main bearing clearances one at a time. Alright, so we got all of our main bearing clearances checked, and everything fell right in where it should be. We got all around 3/1000ths on all 5, so we're good to go. I'm gonna get this bagged up and start checking rod bearing clearances. Something to note on these BBM blocks, they have the 2 oil galleries on top of each other. This bottom one is not functional because there's no relief on the pan rail. So not sure why they did that. Go ahead and plug it anyway. Plug that 1/8 inch pipe plug there, and you'll be good to go. Well, I got a little bit further, but not as far as I wanted to go. The only rod bearings I have are X bearings, and I was coming up with about 3.5 thousandths. So it's about a thou more than what I wanted. So I'm gonna have to order some bearings. But got all of our rods washed and cleaned up and ready to check bearing clearances when the bearings come in. Otherwise, I am done for the day. Hope you guys are having a excellent day, excellent week. We're supposed to get bad weather, so I hope you don't see that. Thinking about selling the Coyote project. I'm having trouble getting parts. I've been waiting for months on a couple of gears. I'd be interested in selling a short block and assembled heads if anybody out there is looking for some Coyote stuff. If you are, get in touch with me. Hope you guys are having a good day. Talk to you soon.